Welcome back to another episode of Vision Basic. First, a quick note in case this topic isn't your cup of tea. Be sure to stick around till the end for some important stuff. Some of you will really want to catch that part of the video. Okay, fellow YouTuber Gray Defender was toying around with the 10 program banks provided by Vision Basic and suggested that I do a video about them. So, here we are. This is a video about program banks in Vision Basic. Now, he actually did a video recently that covered banks in some detail, so I'm going to cover a lot of similar ground here, but I'm going to try to explain banks as extensively as I can. Plus, I'm also going to cover how I plan to improve their use for version 1.2 of Vision Basic, which I'm currently working on. Anyhow, please make sure to check out Gray Defender's video, since he also talks about polling a 4-player controller interface. I'll put a link to the video in the description. Before I continue, it's important to know that I fixed a few bugs in version 1.1 and version 1.1.1 of Vision Basic. And one of those bugs made banks 1 through 9 a bit buggy to work with. Anyhow, for a more pleasurable experience while using the extra program banks, make sure to use version 1.0 of Vision Basic or the newly released version 1.1.2. Okay, so the word bank can get confusing when you're using Vision Basic because there are a few types of banks a person could run across. For example, the C64 memory is broken down into 16K sections called video memory banks, and the bank command can be used to select between them. And expanded memory, like that found in an REU or a GeoRAM cartridge, is comprised of banks, which are smaller chunks of memory within the expanded memory. Now, before I go further, let's go into file mode. And go over to banks. Vision Basic provides areas within the expanded memory, also called banks. But these areas don't necessarily line up with the way banks are laid out in expanded memory. These banks are set up to allow you to place different sections of code in each bank. And you can also use the bank command to select between them as well, like you can with video memory banks, but in immediate mode only. So why do these banks exist? Well, for multiple reasons really. You can use them to work on more than one program at a time, for example. The default memory bank is bank 0, but we can place another program in bank 1, for example, if we want to. Heck, we could put a total of 10 programs into memory if we'd like to. You can also spread your program out across multiple banks if you'd like. This allows you to section off parts of your code, and this can help to keep your program organized. The nice thing about these banks is that you can have the same exact line numbers in each bank without conflict. So the main program could start with line 10, but so can each section of your program in the different banks. This feature is helpful especially when it comes to add-on packs because the add-on pack might have some line numbers in common with the main program. By putting the add-on pack in a different bank, a crisis is averted. By default, only the first program bank is actually turned on. The default size for this bank is 64K or less, depending on how much expanded memory you have. The rest of the banks are 16K or less in size, again depending on how much expanded RAM you have. The first column, right here, is for describing the content of each bank. Only 12 characters are available per line. The second column, here, shows a bar that indicates how much memory is being used in each bank. All of these banks are empty, so there are no bars to see here yet. And the last column, right here, if it's not apparent, shows whether a bank is on or off, and it also shows which bank is currently active. If you don't plan to ever use banks 1 through 9, I recommend leaving all of those banks turned off. But if you want to use any number of banks, you could simply turn them all on and save that as a default. There's no penalty for keeping them all turned on. There are special cases where you won't want them all turned on, but it can lead to confusion or problems if you have only a random assortment of banks turned on. For this video, we're going to turn them all on. To turn on a bank, you simply tap the spacebar. You can also start typing text if you wish to name it. Let's say that we want to add the graphics add-on pack to our new program and we want it to reside in a separate bank. So I'll type graphics pack, and I'll spell it wrong just for fun, because we don't have enough characters for the full word pack if we spell graphics correctly. Now I can press return, which brings us down to the next bank, and we can also turn this bank on and also give it a name. But for now, we'll just keep turning the rest of the banks on. So we'll simply press the spacebar and then press the cursor down arrow to advance to the next bank. And we'll just keep doing this. And voila. Now, this is very important, but if you press the spacebar on a bank that's already on, it will make it the current bank. So if I press the spacebar again here at the bottom, the 9th bank, it will become the current bank. Notice that the indicator on the right is now yellow and has a plus sign. Well, we don't want this. We want to make the second bank the current bank. So let's go back up to the second bank and press the spacebar there. And now it's the current bank. And as a side note, when you make a bank a current bank and you go back into regular editing mode, the program in that bank will become the one that you will be working on. Now, to turn a bank off, you simply press Shift Space. But since one of these banks must remain the current or active one, you can't simply press Shift Space on the current bank. See, watch. Nothing happens. Vision Basic can't read your mind and decide which bank you wish to make current or active. So to turn off bank 1, we'd have to make another bank current and then come back to it to turn it off. Let me demonstrate. So we'll make this one the current one, and then now we can turn it off. And we can turn off this one and this one. And again, this is just Shift Space. And I'm going to restore everything back because, we need it. We need these banks to be on. Well, actually, we just need the first two for now. Now, when a bank is turned off, it won't be included during compile time. And empty banks aren't included either. If you save your program banks to disk, the code in all banks that are turned on will be saved to disk. So if you go with my first idea of putting more than one program into memory at one time, then all of those programs will be saved to disk as a single program. And if you have multiple programs in memory at one time and try to compile things, all of the programs will end up being compiled together as one big blob. So keep that in mind. Again, this has to do with program banks that are turned on. You can turn off various banks and they won't be compiled, and they won't be saved to disk either. But the code will still reside in the expanded memory. Now, as another side note, if you are working on multiple programs at the same time, you merely just turn off the banks for the other programs and just have the one bank on for the program that you're working on. I'm not sure who would actually want to have multiple programs in memory at the same time, but I think there are some cases to be made for having more than one program in memory. Now, we don't have any code yet in bank 1. When you attempt to load a program into memory, Vision Basic will attempt to load it into the current bank, not merely the first bank, which is 0. Let's go back into the editor and load our graphics pack. And I will make another note here that this title here, this bank title here, is going to vanish because once we load in the graphics pack, it will be replaced. And the graphics pack I don't think has a title, so at least saved with it. Alright, so we are going to load graphics pack. Oh no, not bank 0. I thought I made one for the current bank. We're going to have to press new on that and switch to bank 1. We'll just do it manually, and now we'll load our graphics pack into memory, and now it will go into bank 1. It's important to note here that this graphics pack is too big for the default size of banks 1 to 9, so I increased the size of those banks to 18K ahead of time. If you do increase the bank size as I have, and you've restarted Vision Basic as you should, Make sure to clear all banks with the new command before loading files and or typing code into Vision Basic. Otherwise, the code left behind in expanded memory may corrupt things going forward. Let's go into file mode real quick and see how things look. We have a red bar here which indicates that the bank is almost full. If you load a file into memory that is too large for a particular bank, it won't be fully loaded into memory, and the bank that it resides in will remain in a potentially dangerous state. So make sure to type new and then rectify the situation if possible. Let's go ahead and change the bank name, like we did earlier, to graphics pack. And we'll give the first bank a name, main program. Now that fits perfectly there. This information here is saved along with your program. Also, if we go over to the Details tab here, we can type further details for each bank if we'd like. These details are useful if you create a program or an add-on pack and you wish to fill in details such as author, date or version number, and a description, especially if you're going to share with other people. The program name is the same name as the file name used the last time you saved your program or cluster of programs, or in this case actually the last program we loaded into memory. To change all of this information for each of the banks, you simply need to change the bank number here, and you can use the spacebar to change the bank number and thus access this extra information for each and every bank. And all of this information gets saved along with your program. You can go through each one. There's only bank 0 and 1 have section titles. We can also go and change the author. Say, hey, me. Date or version number. Let's just call it 1.1.1. There you go. And description, thing that draws circles and stuff. Right, stiff. No, stuff. Nope. Stuff. Okay. And actually, the main thing I really want to change here is the program name, because if we're going to, if we're going to have a program, well, I don't know, we're just going to call it circles. And that's going to be the name of our program. And when we save it, it will save bank 0 and bank 1, and it'll go under the name circles as it's being saved to disk. And now we exit file mode. The graphics add-on pack has instructions for use and some demo lines of code, but they take up extra memory, so let's delete some lines. And as you can see, this is all really just demo stuff here. And then here are the instructions for use. So, and then at some point, the actual add-on pack starts. So let's go ahead and get out of this lister mode, and we're going to type delete 0 through 911, and that's actually in the description, believe it or not. And then say, sure, why not? And then lister. And now you can see that all the lines prior to 995 have been deleted. And there are some more, there's a lot of code in here I could also delete, but I don't want to go through that for this video. If you're just going to use the circle command, then you don't need square root, and you don't need the command that draws squares and whatnot. So anyhow, we are going to go back into file mode and go back to banks, and now you can see that we're only using about half of bank 1 right now after deleting those lines. But let's make bank 0 the current bank and type in a few lines of code. And we're going to make this the current bank. And we're going to exit. And for the sake of expediency, you don't want to sit here and watch me type all this, so insert. Enter. One thing you might be wondering is how we're supposed to call subroutines that reside in other banks. Well, Vision Basic will actually execute the code in all banks sequentially, so code in bank 0 will be executed first, and if the flow bleeds into the next bank, Vision Basic will simply start to execute the code that it finds there, and this could keep happening all the way up to bank 9. But I don't think most people will choose to code this way. If you have a line 2000 in bank 3, you cannot simply type go sub 2000 in bank 2 and expect Vision Basic to know what you mean. The code within a particular bank can only call for line numbers within that bank. And the reason for this is simple, because we can have the same exact line numbers in each of the banks. We could have a line 2000 in every single bank if we want to, for example. So the trick is to use tags or procedures, and both of these are a type of label. In line 40 here, you can see that we're using a user-defined command from the add-on pack in bank 1 called circle. This user-defined command or routine simply draws a circle on the bitmap screen. Let's run things and see what happens. The compile time can take a good 17 seconds or so. We can trim that time down if we delete unnecessary routines from the run pack in bank 1, as mentioned earlier. Anyhow, and the pause here is for calculating the sine and cosine values that the circle command needs to do its thing. That's why the screen was black for a brief couple seconds. Anyhow, this is just a simple demo. I will admit that using the extra banks in Vision Basic is a bit clunky, but I do plan to improve their use in future versions of the software. The idea for having these extra banks in Vision Basic is kind of a last-minute thing I threw in, so it wasn't super well developed. I mean, I didn't throw them in at the very last minute, but I don't think the idea was on the drawing board for most of Vision Basic's development. I was just glad that they worked when I programmed them into the mix. But you do need to keep in mind that it's easy to forget about the code in the other banks. Someone wrote a program and forgot that they had code in another bank, so the extra code ended up being saved along with their program. And on top of that, the extra code would get compiled along with their program. And then you also get the bulk that comes along with that. So, another thing, if you have code on screen from one bank and you press return over that code while in another bank, that code will be copied into the other bank as well. I recommend keeping different ranges of line numbers in each bank in case this happens. That way you can easily see that you've accidentally copied code into another bank when you go to list things. So in one bank you can have lines 0 to 999. Then in another bank you can have 1000 through 1999 and so forth, or however you want to do it. If you're going to use multiple banks with some frequency, you might want to switch from simply typing new over to typing new 0 through 9. Otherwise, the code left in other banks can become part of other projects. Now, I'm not going to press return right now because I want to show you something, so I'll press shift return. Another thing to keep in mind is that programs will be loaded into the current bank you're in, so you need to be careful when loading things. The different sections of a program will be loaded into successive banks as long as they are turned on. If not enough banks are turned on, not all sections will end up being loaded into memory. The verify command also starts verifying from the current bank you're in, so make sure you're in the correct bank before proceeding to verify some code. And I need to make sure I'm in bank 0, so we'll just do it that way. Let me show you an example program that I whipped up really quick that doesn't do a whole lot. You'll see that as we load this program, since we have code in banks 0 and 1, we are being asked if we wish to merge the new content with the old, or we could skip past the current bank being loaded into, or we could replace the bank's content altogether, or we could choose to abort the loading process. I do want to point out that the merge option doesn't technically merge new and old code on a line-by-line basis. The code from disk actually gets appended to what's already in memory. But append and abort both start with the letter A, so I chose to go with the word merge that you see here, right here. We're just going to select to replace the code that is in both banks and zeros. So R and R. If we type list, we will only see one line of code. Again, this is a very simple program that only exists for demonstration purposes. But if we enter file mode, you can see that each bank up to bank 6 has some code in it, right here. I gave each bank its own title, and the idea here is to show you how a person might use each bank so that each bank focuses on a particular aspect of a potential game program. If we go to the Details tab, we can provide some more details for each of these banks, and I've already mentioned that before. Of course, you probably won't want to plug in details for each and every bank. You could simply specify the author, the date or version number, and give a description of your program for just the first bank alone. So that if you gave the code to some friend or something like that, they're like, oh yeah, Jeffrey did it, or, I mean, I'm not Jeffrey, but, If we exit file mode and run the program, you can see that each of the banks is executed in order. Each line that you see here gets printed by code that exists in all of the separate banks. And I'll demonstrate. If you go to bank 0 and list it, you got that. And we go to bank 1 and list it, we have that. And if we type bank 2 and list it, we get that. And we'll just skip on to bank 6. I think it's 6. Yeah. And list it, and we get that. I mean, simple. I just wanted to create something quick, folks. I'm sorry. These videos are a lot of work, and sometimes you just need something simple. Aside from the fact, I do want to make a note that this is the third day I've tried to record this video, and I've had technical difficulties. And again, you don't have to have each bank execute in order. You could put subroutines in each of the banks and have them called from the main program. You can have the main loop in bank 1 call the code in banks 2 and 3, and banks 2 and 3 could call for sound effects in bank 5, for example. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up everything I think needs to be said about program banks and their potential uses. If you have further questions or think I've missed something, just let me know in the comments. I'd like to leave you all with a sneak peek at what's going on at the Vision Basic laboratories. I'm cooking up some new features for Vision Basic that will become part of the version 1.2 release. It could take many months, so don't get too anxious. Also, I don't plan to update the manual for version 1.2. This will probably be a minor release, but with some very important changes. So if you're planning to purchase Vision Basic, I'd say not to hold off until the release of version 1.2. Just go ahead and purchase version 1.1. Anyhow, the stuff you're about to see wasn't going to be part of the version 1.2 release, or at least not to the level I'm about to show you all. But the function keys are going to serve a useful purpose in Vision Basic, and I'll switch over to a new window to show you what I've got so far. So the program I have in memory is a very simple game. I have it laid out as a game with multiple levels, where each level resides in a separate program bank. I'm just going to pretend it's a spy game, and the only actual level I have to show you is what could become some kind of car chase. Again, it's a very simple game. I spent maybe an hour making it. It's kind of inspired by a game called Rotor that I typed in from a Compute magazine, and it's also similar to a ski game found in a family computing magazine. And we're talking about like 1980s and maybe early 90s for those magazines. Anyhow, let's go over what the function keys do. We're going to skip to function F2. This saves your program using the file name that your program was last saved under. So if we press F2, It will attempt to save the game back to disk. I haven't made any changes, so we'll just select no for now. Let's skip on to the F5 key. This performs the lister command. So now you don't have to type the full command out. All you need to do is just hit the F5 key. And that's very underwhelming, so I'm going to go to bank 1. I was supposed to be in bank 1 for this. Let's press it again. There you go. Something more interesting visually. You'll notice that each function key here displays the key that's being pressed along with the function. I'd like your input on how this looks. I like the message off to the left side like this. And I made it big enough and bold enough to be seen, but hopefully not too obnoxious in appearance. Keep in mind that additions like this to Vision Basic add more size to the Vision Basic program, and space right now is very limited. So I tried to maintain a simple look. But there is a complexity here behind the scenes, despite how simple this all may look in appearance. It would boggle your mind. Now, if you press the F7 key, this compiles your resident program in memory. F7 is conveniently placed at the bottom column of function keys, so it's quick and easy to get to. And we need to press... And let's get out of this so I can press F7. If you shift the F7 key, you get F8, which will also compile your program if necessary, and then execute it. I'm not ready to run the program just yet, so we'll hold off on pressing F8 for now. I think this is kind of a weak assignment because you have to shift the key in order to run your program, and most of us can type run rather quickly. Having to shift the key does help to protect against accidentally executing a resident program, so that's why I assigned run to a shifted function key. Perhaps assigning verify to the key might be the better option? What are your thoughts, my peeps? Now let's back up to the F6 key, which performs the vlist command, which lists our program's variables. Now the reason I'm hopping around is because I wanted to save the best keys for last. Let's talk about what the F1 key does. It's in a quick and easy spot for tapping, so what does it do? Let's find out. Quick access to file mode. The nice thing about these last few keys is that they all don't affect the position of your cursor key after all is said and done. Let's exit and move the cursor to a different spot and I'll show you. So let's just go up here. I'll just hang out on the B of abs, okay? And then I'll press F1 again. We're back in, file mode. And then we'll exit. And you can see that we are on the B. And since this video is about program banks, wouldn't it be nice if we could use function keys for something bank related? Well, let's see what F3 and F4 do. Oh my, check that out. I'm able to quickly jump on over to any bank of my choosing with a mere few keystrokes. And this is better than using the bank command because we're not flying blind. We can see the name assigned to each bank as we go through the list. And I'll show you again. So we have all the names here. Again, this is something to look forward to in version 1.2. But I'm definitely making sure these keys are in the mix. Let's talk about the simple game I made for this demonstration. Like the game I talked about earlier called Rotor, I wanted to have a curvy road, but I didn't want to use the sine or cosine function like they did in the game because it's slow. So I used a method of averaging to achieve a similar look without the cost of speed involved in using a trig function. I'll give you a peek at the code so you can see how I pulled this off. And let's make sure we're in bank 1. Okay. And then we'll press F5. And just pause the video if you want to examine the code. Let's see. I don't know how many lines. Yeah, that's about it. Not a huge program. Like I said, very simple. Anyhow, let's run it. And we're going to use our F8 key as I mentioned earlier. Oops. Crashed right away. Alright. Whoa. Oh, crashed again. Now, y'all know that I suck at playing video games, so at least you should by now. But hey, let's try it again. Whoa. Nope, crashed again. Boy, that's terrible. I'm terrible. I suck. Okay. And just... I can't show very much. This is a car, by the way. I know it is probably about the most car-like character, I think, in the whole bunch. Just pretend. Just use your imagination. And also another thing I want you guys to pay attention to is the curvature of the road. Remember, there are no sine and trig functions involved here. It's just pretty much averaging some values. And I'm going to brag about that part, but that's about it. So let's try one more time and just watch the curves, man. Oops. If I could survive. Nope. One more time. Let's try it one more time. Okay, here we go. I think I could do this. Gotta stay ahead of it. No! Dang nabbit. Oh, whoa. 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 Oh, crashed. Okay. Again, a very, very simple game. But hey, I whipped it up rather fast, and I figured out the math rather quickly as well. I could do so much better, and y'all know this. I just didn't want to take forever to make this video. I want to say one more thing before I go. The NeoRAM cartridge is a great way to boot up into Vision Basic very quickly. I'm working to acquire some more cartridges for those who are interested. But there is another way to boot up into Vision Basic rather quickly, and it only takes about 12 seconds. On my personal C64 at home, I have JiffyDOS installed in the computer, and I also have a little uIEC/SD. I don't know where that name came from. And both are sold by Retro Innovations. I've already advertised JiffyDOS in the past, but I do think the little uIEC/SD is a nice thing to have as well. It works super well with JiffyDOS, and it allows you to store disk images to an SD card and load those images like you would a regular disk drive. Now, I know that there are similar devices that have SD cards, but I don't know if those work with JiffyDOS. So this specific one works with JiffyDOS, I know that much. I mean, 12 seconds, that's not really very long at all. And I mean, you could do save states and stuff like that, and the C64 Mini Maxi, and even Vice, I think, has a a save state file thing. I'll provide a link to that device in the description as well. The little uIEC/SD. Alright, we've reached the end of this video. As usual, I thank you all for watching. Really, I do. Thank you very much. Please like and share my video. Please, please, please. And definitely subscribe for more similar content. And make sure to visit visionbasic.net.